Toru Shy is an embarrassing superhero who is too nervous and shy to talk properly to everyone around her or even properly fight her enemies. The story begins around the 21st century when war had disappeared from Earth and people with superhuman strength suddenly appeared around the world and worked really hard like construction workers who don't do too much labor. One day, a hero named Shy nervously makes a public appearance in front of a small crowd and quickly greets them before rushing off the stage and throwing up in a trash can. Suddenly, she realizes that the roller coaster has stopped and quickly starts saving everyone. However, as she's about to say the final girl left, the roller coaster suddenly starts moving again and flies off the track. Shy hurriedly charges towards it and manages to stop it from crashing, but it still results in the girl, Aiko, getting critically injured, after which everyone starts questioning heroes. 1 month later, Teruaka Shy remains discouraged and her self-doubt makes her unable to transform into her hero form. Russian heroine Spirit arrives to comfort Teru, assuring her that no hero can save everyone, and she must carry on for those she couldn't save. Teru suddenly spots a hotel fire, and since she's inspired by Aiko's younger brother's courage, Teru transforms and enters the blaze, where she saves a mother and child despite her fear before her equipment starts malfunctioning, because of course, your equipment wouldn't work properly if you hadn't properly oiled it. However, Spirit arrives just in time to help, reassuring Teru of her bravery. Later, Shy is personally thanked by the boy she saved and Spirit encourages her as well, after which Teru meets Unilord, leader of the heroes, who calls on her to get ready for future threats to Earth. Back at school, Teru is surprised to meet her new classmate, Aiko. Caught off guard, she cheerily greets Aiko. At school, Teru sees Aiko interacting with their classmates, but is called to the teacher's office. During break, Teru, thinking about what Aiko said about Shy, is surprised when her pal, Abo, suddenly appears, delivering some forgotten homework and suggesting that Aiko likely doesn't think about Shy much. Inside, Teru finds Aiko in pain near the staircase and helps her to the nurse's office because she just can't do that by herself. While resting, Aiko apologizes, explaining she forgot her painkillers due to being nervous on her first day. Aiko then compares Teru's helpfulness to Shy's, and when Teru asks if she holds any grudge against Shy for her leg injury, Aiko reassures her, saying she is only grateful. Relieved, Teru leaves in tears. Meanwhile, Aiko's pain suddenly intensifies and a mysterious boy appears, placing a ring on her finger. Teru returns to find that Aiko has shockingly transformed into a monster, her body covered in painful black crystals, which Abo identifies as manifestations of psychic energy. Aiko attacks Teru, whose dodge reveals Aiko's self-hatred, which comes from guilt over her parents' death and the criticism Shy faced for failing her. "Well, you shouldn't have told her to save everyone else first, you idiot." Aiko desperately tries to end her life, but Shy stops her and offers help. She takes Aiko to a safe, empty place and hurriedly rushes towards her to take the cursed ring off of her, but Aiko suddenly creates a crystal coating around her hand. As Aiko declares that a hero should have been there for her when her house burned down, Shy tells her to throw all of her hatred at her and recalls what her grandfather said to her as Aiko relives her past trauma, where her parents reassure her it wasn't her fault. Shy, bearing Aiko's pain, successfully removes the ring, leaving Aiko, after which Aiko tearfully thanks her. Later, Abo reports to Unilord that Shy took care of the threat as Aiko happily takes Shy's hand and thanks her for saving her. Days after Stigma's appearance, Teru anxiously checks her appearance on her phone while Abo, hiding in her hat, is surprised she asked it to join her. Aiko soon arrives, introducing herself to Abo, and Teru says she's worried about Aiko's leg. Assuring she's fine, Aiko enthusiastically pulls Teru along to hang out, but Teru gets quickly worn out. Aiko apologizes and takes them to eat, while Teru tries to cheer her up by revealing what she said to the nurse, but this only reminds Aiko of their previous incident, making Teru feel guilty. During their outing, they encounter a lost boy, and Aiko confidently helps him find his parents. Teru likes Aiko's way with children, and Aiko explains she often cared for her younger brother, also thanking Teru for saving him at the T1 hotel. They reunite the boy with his family, and Aiko advises him to be kind, inspired by Shy's example. When Aiko notices a poster of Stardust, she wonders about his character, but Teru hasn't met him. Later, Spirit calls Teru, summoning her and Aiko to the hero's hideout alongside Stardust. Teru nervously asks about Stardust aka Davey Wonder John, who finishes filming a video clip and declines social plans. At the hideout, Unilord, after making borscht, explains that Shy's recovery of a cursed ring was important. In her excitement, Aiko accidentally trips and falls, but Stardust saves her. Unilord proposes a training battle between Shy and Stardust, despite Spirit being worried about Stardust's ruthlessness. However, Shy agrees, determined to gain strength even at the risk of her hero title. They set battle terms. Stardust wins if Shy's transformation dispels, and Shy wins if she lands a face hit. As they face off against each other, Stardust takes out a coin and says the fight begins once this coin hits the floor, like the weird neighbor you never want to stop and talk to. He flings it upwards as Aiko encouragingly tells Teru to not push herself too hard before Shy rushes forward. As the coin hits the ground, Shy charges at Stardust, but repeatedly misses. Stardust mockingly says her empathy is her weakness, declaring that it prevents her from fighting effectively, while his heartlessness gives him an edge. Shy tries again, but is beaten down. Aiko, watching anxiously, learns from Unilord that Stardust's heart shift bracelets let him manipulate all surrounding flows. Stardust urges Shy to fight with lethal intent, or he will kill her, angering Spirit, though neither she nor Unilord can intervene without disqualifying Shy. Aiko begs Shy to quit, but Shy gets up again, igniting the flames of her heart. She tries to strike Stardust, believing her flames can bypass his defenses, but he dodges and strikes back. Despite this, Shy gets back up, saying Stardust does, in fact, have a heart. He finally realizes what bothers him. Unlike others, Shy never looked at him with hatred. This disturbs him, as he recalls childhood memories of a friend challenging him to embrace gentleness, a lesson Stardust never fully grasped. Shy ultimately manages to land a punch, though her transformation ends immediately afterward. Stardust catches her as she collapses, noting that while her kindness may be ill-suited for a hero, it has the potential to change the world. Admitting defeat, he congratulates her and leaves, thinking about Shy's words. Later, Spirit thanks Stardust for the experience he gave Shy, though she says she doesn't like his methods. Teru, now healed, wakes up in the infirmary to Lady Black, scolding her about making Aiko worry so deeply. Dr. Schwartz, another Black Cross hero, reassures her, and Aiko tearfully hugs Teru upon waking. Walking home together, Teru vows to grow stronger to avoid making Aiko worry again, only to burst into tears herself. Back home, Abo informs Teru about a new disaster in China, likely Stigma's doing. Determined, Teru declares that she can't falter from now on so that she can be everyone's hero, that is, if she actually still has any social integrity left. Teru, while visiting Nagata Stationery, nervously tries to greet the owner, Chihiro Nagata, who reminisces about running the shop alone since her husband's death. When Teru mentions Dandelion Mountain, inspired by a painting in the shop, Chihiro explains her late husband painted it, and she climbs it each year in his memory. Teru later reflects on how to help Chihiro, but feels unsure of herself. Unexpectedly, Piltz Dunit aka Lady Black visits for a checkup. After confirming Teru's health, she agrees to go with her to help Chihiro with her abilities, though Piltz initially hesitates. Together, they take Chihiro to climb Dandelion Mountain. Teru struggles to keep up, but Piltz, who admits she doesn't enjoy climbing, shares her motivation. As a child with prosthetic legs, she was talked down on and climbed mountains to prove her strength. Reaching the summit, Piltz encourages Teru, urging her to have more confidence. Back at the shop, Chihiro thanks them, and Piltz promises to help Teru become a true hero. Days later, Teru practices summoning fire with her powers but struggles. She's distracted by this even at school, making Aiko notice her unusual mood. After school, Teru finds herself drawn to a kanji of the word flame on a wall, where she meets a girl named Suzori Murasaki, who introduces her to the calligraphy club. The club president explains that calligraphy can express one's inner feelings, inspiring Teru. Back home, Teru practices writing kanji with determination and finally manages to produce a flame by channeling her feelings into her writing. However, the paper suddenly ignites, seeing which Teru hurriedly calls Abo to put out the fire. Later, Teru decides to write out her heart and happily does it, realizing even she can do it if she tries. She happily says she's glad she gave it her all before Abo hurriedly points out that the paper is on fire. In a glacier, Stigma frees a girl and instructs her to only destroy heroes. Meanwhile, in Japan, Teru tells Aiko she has finally learned to control her powers before being summoned by Unalert. Teru, known as Shy, heads to an Arctic base with Spirit to respond to an urgent call, where they meet Mayan Long, a hero who joins them on a mission to rescue a research vessel. On the way, Mayan nervously asks Shy and Spirit if his dislike for fighting makes him cowardly, which Shy relates to. Near their destination, their helicopter is down by an ice projectile. They save the crew, but are confronted by the ice-wielding Sveta, who battles Shy and Spirit. Sveta injures Spirit and reveals her mission to warm up by defeating heroes. While Spirit directs Mian to guard civilians and Shy to help, Sveta targets Shy so Spirit temporarily immobilizes Sveta, who reveals she was sent to eliminate heroes. When Shy tries to contact Unalert, Sveta distracts Spirit, wounding her with an ice projectile. Mian Long defends Shy, clashing with Sveta in close combat. Sveta creates a massive ice block to try and kill them both, but Shy's flames melt the ice, allowing Mian to use his fists of the sleeping dragon to knock Sveta unconscious. As they free Spirit, Stigma appears with Weepy Ternite, who traps Mayan with water while Stigma retrieves Sveta. Spirit frees Mayan and confronts Stigma, but he dismisses her. Before leaving, he introduces his group as Amararuku, leaving Shy, Spirit, and Mian to question what he really wants. Unalert, Shy, and Mayan Long think about Stigma's speech and the foundation of Amararuku, particularly concerning Sveta, who can wield ice without needing the ring. Unalert apologizes for failing to detect Stigma's trap, though neither Shy nor Mayan Long blame her. Just then, Lady Black calls Shy, signaling her treatment is done, and they leave, but Unalert is still worried about future threats. In the nurse's office, Peppisha quickly tries to hide her injury before Unalert, Mayan Long, and Shy arrive and ask if she's alright. Peppisha tries to say it's nothing, but Lady Black worries that Peppisha was hurt despite being transformed. Peppisha also questions Sveta's reference to her and how young the Amararuku's members were. Unalord decides to call Aiko for information on Stigma, and the team agrees, though slightly concerned. During the discussion, Unalord shares updates on Stigma's ring, while Aiko says she saw Stigma's childish heart during her battle with Shy. She thinks his ultimate goal is world peace, surprising the team, especially Lady Black, who apparently doesn't want world peace. Later, Shy cosplays as Revozexal from Rise of Civil Revolution at Hiromi's request, hoping to promote sales. Though initially skeptical, Shy finds herself answering questions from excited children. A boy, however, scolds her for pretending to be Revozexal. Although Shy agrees, he's quickly shushed by others and leaves embarrassed like the mean bully who gets ganged up on and bullied. Shy later finds him and, after chatting, retrieves his lost balloon, telling him that liking something isn't restricted by gender. He begins to see her as the real Revozexal. At the end of the day, Hiromi gives Shy her reward. At the airport, Aiko checks with Teru to ensure she's ready. Abo reassures her before Teru leaves for Russia, where she meets with Peppisha to investigate Sveta. Teru is curious about Peppisha's drinking, and Peppisha jokes that she wouldn't be recognized sober. They arrive at Yuri Orphanage, where Isaac greets them warmly, complimenting Peppisha's Russian, though she uses bracelets as translators. Inside, the children excitedly welcome Peppisha, and Isaac explains she left the orphanage 10 years ago, but has since supported it financially. Isaac shows them to a room with photo albums of Peppisha's time there, and Peppisha shares her feelings of loneliness after leaving the orphanage and shows Teru a reserved, younger version of herself in a photo. Teru notices how similar Peppisha looks to Sveta and decides to investigate further before a photo of Peppisha and her mother falls out, reminding her of her quiet yet talkative mother, Latana, when drinking. Teru realizes Peppisha is like that too before Isaac invites them to lunch. Suddenly, they hear a child scream outside and rush to find a frozen child. Peppisha and Teru transform before Isaac and Natalia. Shy melts the ice, but is ambushed by Hiyakekarakera, pretending to be a victim. Peppisha realizes Sveta is present, who remarks that she needs to remember her feelings for Peppisha. Sveta, full of hatred for the world but warmth for the orphanage, covers it in ice, creating a separate world she calls Amararuku. Sveta engulfs Yuri Orphanage in her icebound realm, Amararuku, as Stigma watches from afar. The orphanage residents, Isaac, Natalia, and the children, quickly fall unconscious, unable to withstand the effects. Shai tries to attack Tveta, but is stopped by Kihei Kakarakara, whose unpredictable abilities make her difficult to counter. Amararuku's power allows Kahe to store and unpredictably unleash various items, further complicating fighting her. Tveta reveals that her true aim is Pepesha's memories, connecting her heart with those of the unconscious residents to destabilize her. Shai, blocked by Kaya, watches helplessly as Tveta's influence begins freezing the civilians, threatening their lives. Enraged, Pepesha charges at Tveta, but Tveta uses this opening to absorb Pepesha's heart, unlocking her memories. "You fool, you fell right into her trap." Pepesha, overwhelmed by these memories, is frozen by Tveta, while Shai remains trapped, hurriedly struggling to free herself. After leaving the orphanage, Latana Andrianova struggled deeply, working hard just to feed her daughter, Pepesha, while depriving herself. As she got more and more depressed, Pepesha remained her only joy. One night, Pepesha noticed Latana wasn't eating, and when she refused to eat as well, Latana angrily told her off. She started feeling guilty, thinking her daughter would never find happiness. Wishing to bring some joy to Pepesha, Latana set out to buy her a cake, but could only afford cookies. The shop owner, noticing her hardship, gave her a cake for free. However, an old man pushed her off a bridge to steal the cake, leading to her death. Both Pepesha and Shai witness Latana's memories through Tveta, who reveals her only wish is for Pepesha's happiness. Pepesha is shocked by this, causing her transformation to almost fade out before Shai intervenes, convinced that Tveta is mistaken in believing Pepesha hates her, yet she doesn't hate her. She just doesn't like people who intend to kill everyone around them. Despite regaining her memories and growing stronger in her icy realm of Amararuku, Tveta's powers don't work against Shai's flames. Shai compares Tveta sacrificing herself to Aiko's, remarking that they both sacrifice themselves for others. Tveta, rejecting Shai, attacks with intensified ice, but Shai remains unfazed and hurriedly urges Pepesha to be honest about her feelings toward her mother, because this is the one time where your feelings actually matter. Inspired, Pepesha regains her Pepesha and transforms back into Pepesha, ready to fight alongside Shai once more. Regaining her resolve, Pepesha as Pepesha decides to express the love she never conveyed to her mother. She questions Tveta, stirring happy memories within her. Yet, Kihei Kekarakera interrupts, reminding Tveta of her dark mission. As Tveta's eyes turn black, Pepesha recalls her past, shortly after joining Yuri Orphanage, where she looked at a photo with Latana. Natalia, seeing her sadness, shared letters Latana wrote when she was drunk, saying she wants to someday drink with her, as Pepesha tearfully missed her mother. Holding Tveta's hands, Pepesha finally tells her she loves her, causing the Amararuku to start breaking because of the power of love and the parental bond. Tveta shares a final drink with Pepesha. As Shai helps the orphanage residents, Tveta and Pepesha sit down with each other, and Tveta says she loves her before disappearing like a hologram whose switch was suddenly cut off. Shai comforts Pepesha, who finishes her drink. Just as she turns to leave, Shai notices a ring where Tveta vanished and points it out to Pepesha. After Tveta disappears, Shai and Pepesha stand outside Yuri Orphanage, where Shai is surrounded by the children hurriedly asking her questions. Natalia approaches Pepesha, reassuring her that Isaac is looking after everyone. She then reflects on Latana, Tveta's original self, who, though quiet, was always a hero to those around her, just like philanthropists. When Shai calls for help, Pepesha guides the children back inside. At that moment, Pepesha receives a call from Abo just as Stardust and Lady Black arrive. With the situation under control, Pepesha hands Tveta's ring to Stardust, who, after a moment, recognizes Shai from earlier training. He encourages her to be proud of her growth. Lady Black checks on the injured, and Shai asks her to care for the civilians. By sunset, Pepesha and Teru bid farewell to Natalia and Isaac, with Teru determined to stop Stigma. Meanwhile, Stigma consoles a grieving Kihei Kakarakara over Tveta's loss. After returning to Japan, resting at home, Teru recalls her late older sister caring for her as a child. Half asleep, she mistakes Aiko for her sister, entreating her. Teru admits her sister died years ago, revealing a vulnerability that makes Aiko realize heroes have ordinary lives. Feeling closer to Teru, Aiko calls her by her first name. The next day, Teru does the same, making Aiko happy. Meanwhile, Hiei is fishing when Doki Baragaki arrives, asking for Stigma's whereabouts. Hiei, hoping Taveta will return, doesn't know. Doki insists she won't, nearly provoking a fight before Inori Halaluda intervenes before Doki asks if Inori knows where Stigma is, and it turns out he is with Utsuro Karakururi, planning their next move at Tokyo Tower. Comment Shy is the most heartwarming superhero in anime. If you want the next part, and if you like anime recaps like this, then watch the video right here.